Welcome back to the AMP'D UP211 Podcast. Today, I'm joined by an extraordinary guest, Cosi Belloso, a physical therapist with over 23 years of experience and a true champion for the amputee community. From founding her own clinic to helping countless individuals regain mobility after limb loss, Cosi's passion and dedication shine through in everything she does. She's also the host of Cosi Talks, a live weekly show where she answers questions about recovery and life after amputation. In this episode, we'll dive into her journey, her work, and how she's changing lives one step at a time. Let's get started. Good morning, Cosi. Good to see you.
Good morning, Rick. Thank you for inviting me.
Look at you getting ready to have something to drink. I'm going to follow one of your little protocols. What are we drinking today, Cosi?
Oh, we've got an espresso double shot because it's just that kind of a day and I need that kind of energy right now.
Really? So
Yes.
caffeine is your jam in the morning?
Is totally my jam. It is my one addiction and I'm just not going to apologize for it. It's in my genes.
I do not drink coffee at all. I know.
How do you survive?
I know. So this is my guilty pleasure is my zero sugar Monster.
Okay.
Which
Ooh.
I know
That's the hard stuff. Yeah.
is terrible for you. And very often people at work will say, "What are you drinking?" And I turn to them and I say, "Poison."
Yes. Yes. That stuff will make you glow in the dark. Caffeine for me, the coffee just makes you do stupid things faster. So that's kind of my,
Yeah.
that's how I
So
see it.
yeah, today's a day that I needed a little kick in the pants. Thank you for being here, of course. And when we started the AMP'D UP211 podcast 2 years ago, I was, jamming on who do I need to get on this show? Because I was in a very ambiguous space at the time, and I knew I wanted to get all kinds of people in the limb loss and limb difference community involved. And I didn't want to reserve that just to amputees, which is, a healthy amount of the guests that we do engage. But I really, really wanted to get with people like yourself, people that are in the community, dedicated to the community, are practitioners, clinicians, people in technology. But your particular endeavor, Cosi Talks, and your video blog and, your clinic, which I read up on, really jumped off the page for me. Like, wow, here's someone that's, dedicating her life to people like me. And I reached out to you, and look at us. About year and a half later, here we are. We're doing it. We're doing the interview, right?
Yes. No, and it's nice to be on the other side of the interviewing table. So yes, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I would think because, I've done a couple, like articles and different things where I've been asked questions, but I've yet to do an actual like podcast or this sort of format where I'm on the other side. So it's interesting for me to sort of engage you knowing that you sit in my seat most often. And I feel like you're very bold in this space because you do so many of your talks are live and you're streaming, and very often you can tell it can be challenging.
And anything goes.
Right. But I feel like your temperament, your humor, and just your light as a person, you just roll with it, man. You're just like, hey, this is just how it is. Let's just go. Let's just do it. And I tend to struggle in those situations. I get nervous and I think I'm going to be tongue tied, or I'm not going to know what to say, or maybe I'm not going to react, the way, because I feel like when I prep for our podcast, I, of course I develop questions. I do all my reading, and, I was always always pretty good about homework when I was a kid. And in business, I'm always prepared for a meeting. Like I never come unprepared. So I like to feel this, maybe it's a illusion of control that I have in that we are not live and we can fix things later. Because so rarely, I mean, Brian, our producer, Brian, we don't fix all that much when you think about it. I mean, we've done plenty of episodes that are really almost live in the sense that you don't have to change a whole lot, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's Brian. You get to hear Brian's
Well,
voice.
I have a funny story. So some people don't know I'm outside of the world of PT. I'm actually a semi-professional violinist and I participate a lot in community theater.
Why
And
did I
years
not
ago I
know
was
that?
yeah, I'm a strange bug. I'm a strange bug professionally and and in my personal life. I don't I don't fit into any kind of peg or any particular shape. But I was cast as the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz.
Really?
Crazy fun role. And we had a live dog Toto. And every night we had 8 performances to sold out house of about, 150 to 200 people audience. And every night that damn dog would do something different. So the first night, opening night, I've got all the special effects with the broom, shooting fire, whatever, whatever. And all of a sudden, this dog just takes off and runs off the stage into the audience. So had to do improv there. Another night, the dog comes and attacks me
Oh my
during the show.
gosh. Well, you're the
So
Wicked Witch. Of
basically,
course it attacked you.
well, yeah, but he wasn't. He was really coming after me because I was kind of scary looking, right? So I was just like, you know what? If I can handle this dog, and then the flying monkey was being played by a 6-year-old, so he was just being rambunctious. And at one point, I'd just pick him off and throw him off the stage. So if I was like, if I can handle that, I could figure out how to do a live show on
Yeah. Well,
basically.
I admire you in that
Thank
regard.
you.
And of course I just gobble up your content because, so often we take this approach of, talking about the personal stories of amputees or people in this community. And I, so highly recommend, if you haven't, to our audience, Cosi does this incredible series of videos you can see on YouTube. These Cosi Talks where, I mean, she drills very deep into so many different, very, very relevant and important issues for new and old amputees. So whether you are struggling in the prosthesis space or you're struggling in the nutritional space or you just need inspiration, um, it's just a fantastic series. And I've been, very much a listener and a watcher, and it's very, very fun to have you here and have the opportunity to ask you some more specific questions because, me developing the podcast really just had a lot to do with my curiosity. And it was initially for me was a very self-serving kind of idea, which was, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could talk to some of these people that I'm following, that I could actually
Mhm.
engage them, get to know them, and feel as if there was a connection point there. Because, I mean, let's face it, you see a lot of people in social media, and that's sort of one dimensional to a certain degree. But I want to go a little deeper and understand a little bit more about what makes people tick and what brought them to this place. And I want to share that and shine a light on it and bring it to a community because I'm sure you can appreciate, given your background medically, that, information is power. It's this massive empowerment tool. Um, being that you're in physical therapy, what would you say, give us, give us the narrative on, what brought you to the amputee space as a physical therapist?
I say this a lot. It was actually just dumb luck.
Hmm.
So when I graduated from PT school and dinosaurs roamed the earth, I put myself in a hospital setting where I was rotating through all the different specialties of physical therapy. And at that time, there were about 15 to 20 different specialties. So every 6 months, I felt like I was basically starting a new career, getting rotated around. It was at the Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. It's a world renowned hospital with a level 1 trauma center, tertiary care facility, huge. We had people being flown in from all over the world. And because I was low man on totem pole, I got the rotations that nobody wanted. So nobody wanted trauma ICU. Nobody wanted the burn trauma rotation. Not very many people wanted spinal cord. And so I got these fantastic opportunities and to learn from amazing mentors. And then I got put into the amputee rotation. And I remember coming home that day to my newlywed husband and saying, babe, I think they're finally going to figure out that I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and they're going to fire me, and I'm going to lose my license, and the world is going to collapse. Right. So just, total drama moment, because I had not received a lot of education on amputees. Most PTs don't.
Yeah.
It's a failing in our education system. But that's another soapbox. So I went in the next day and I was just like, okay, this is it. And my senior PT and amputee, his name was Curtis Clark. And not many people know his name because he's a very quiet, humble man. But he wrote the book on a lot of amputee protocols for physical therapists. And he's the guy who trained Bob Gailey. And everybody knows who Bob Gailey is.
Yep.
So he comes to me that first day and he says, look, I know you don't know the difference even between a below the knee and above the knee. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he knows. And he said, and I'm going to sit with you and we're going to train you. So he blocked off a full week and he just gave me all of the educational literature that I needed to know. And then he sat with me with every single patient as if I were a student. And he just taught me. And we had some of the most amazing cases come in during that time. So it was hard not to fall in love with the field and my patient care when I just by having, someone else who was so passionate about it and wanted to teach me. And that was just something that really lit a fire under me. So as the years went by and I worked in so many different settings and I started my family and I moved to Tampa, I really just had a desire to continue to serve amputees. And so that's kind of what lit the fire under me at that time.
Yeah, that's fantastic that you had a mentor in that situation. I want to say I spent about 6 weeks in rehab after my amputation at a place called Marion Joy and in Illinois. And I have to say that it was such an incredibly empowering, validating kind of experience for me. It was really the launch pad that put me on the right trajectory. Had I been sent home, which I hear sometimes through other
a lot of times.
Yeah, through other amputees, I'll say, okay, you're post-op, like what's going on? Oh, I'm going home tomorrow. And I'm thinking, what? Like how? Right? And I reflect on my own experience and feel very, very fortunate, very blessed that I had professionals like yourself, in PT and OT that were guiding me. And I remember the physical therapist that I worked with in the gym post-op, and I remember going in to see him the first day, and he's talking, he's kind of walking me through, okay, here's all the resistance training we're going to do, and we're going to do all this other stuff, and they got all the mats and the tables and all this stuff. And I remember him saying, do you have any questions? And I said, well, I don't know if this is really a question. I said, I need you to really push me. And he goes, oh, we're going to push you.
Come on. Game on. Never tell a PT. You never tell a PT, go ahead and push me more, or that wasn't hard enough.
Yeah. He goes, oh, we're going to push you. And I just recall coming out of surgery and you're in this weakened state. I mean, you're nowhere near 100%. And I remember, like, for the first week, just telling him over and over again, man, you're strong. just kept telling him that. He's like, he goes, well, maybe. He goes, I think you're just really weak right now. He goes, we're going to get you strong. And by the time I left, yeah, we were definitely, kind of,
Uh-huh.
matching each other strength wise,
Yeah.
where he'd be
Oh yeah.
pushing, I'd be pushing back, and he'd be like, okay, that's the Rick. That's the real Rick right there. And it was a phenomenal experience and something that I'll always just reflect on as such a huge, starting point, putting me in that mindset of I need to find my best self now. And this will not define me. And I talk to so many amputees that will speak of how they found their best self through an amputation. And when I get a little deeper into that conversation, it usually has to do with who they surrounded themselves with and who was their team. Who were the people that enabled that mindset? And I would imagine that for yourself, you must have, some stories that you feel like, there was such a huge connection in what you provided, for that patient. I would think so, right?
Oh, absolutely. And just even pulling from my own personal experience, it's who you're surrounded by because it takes a village. But then it's also how are you going to take this trauma and this horrible crisis that happened to you? And you have two choices. You either play the hand you were dealt or you fold. And when it came to, for example, I have a history of breast cancer myself, and that was the catalyst that started a lot of my work for the past 6 years. But at that time, getting that cancer diagnosis with four young children at a young age, um, for me, it was the realization of okay, there is a plan in my life, and for me, God was directing that plan, and I had the choice to follow His plan, put my trust in Him, or to fight it, be angry, become resentful, become bitter, become scared, and become anxious. And it's not to say that those feelings don't emerge because we're human. But ultimately, it's for me, and I've seen this also in many of my patients, the mindset of there is a plan for me in this life, and I have a path to take, and I can either fight it or I can embrace and accept what's happened and see how I can make the best of it and move forward with it.
Yeah. And being a cancer survivor, um, which, when I was researching for the interview today, I picked up on that somewhere, whether it was
Yeah.
it was an article
There's a
or
few articles. Yeah,
yeah, there was something
probably. Yeah.
floating around on the internet, and I thought, whoa, okay, well that's an interesting ripple. I mean that is part of your backstory that I would think created some components for you to certainly you're not an amputee. However, being a survivor, and my mom is a breast cancer survivor, um, being a survivor of such a serious illness can sort of lay some foundation there for you to be able to relate to
Oh,
that
absolutely.
yeah, to that struggle, managing ideas of mortality, managing ideas of loss, and being able to, like you said, get yourself surrounded by the right kind of energy to be able to overcome those things. So,
Absolutely.
how long ago was that you had cancer?
So it'll be on December 4th. It'll be 9 years since my diagnosis. And then um, it'll be 9 years since my diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I'm going on 8 years being cancer free. Thanks be to God. So, and I say this a
Congratulations.
lot, thank you, a lot of my lectures, especially when I lecture to a group of amputees and family members and caregivers, I always start by saying, I will never be able to relate in the sense that I didn't lose a limb, but I know what it's like to have my world turned upside down from one minute to the next and to have to spend the lifelong process of healing. And that's exactly what that is. And I say this on my show a lot. I'm not a mental health counselor or professional, but I've had to do a lot of mental health with my patients over the years. And I've realized healing is a physical, emotional, and spiritual process. And you have to address all three, regardless of what your beliefs might be. You need to address all three to have a good outcome, in my opinion. And it truly is lifelong. For the amputee, obviously, you are faced with your mortality and complications down the line that can arise from amputation. And for cancer patients, once you're a cancer patient, you're always a cancer patient for the rest of your life, right? And having to acknowledge that
Yeah.
mortality and the complications there too. And it was definitely, for me, the cancer was certainly the catalyst. It was certainly the catalyst for everything that I've done in the past 6 years.
Yeah, it's an
I was a
incredible story. I mean, it really is when you consider, how that sort of pointed you in that direction, and then,
Yeah.
to stumble into that amputee space and go,
Yeah.
well, wait a second. I in many ways, I kind of feel like some of these patients are describing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of went through this process, and
Yeah.
those types of situations, um, very complex and very different for everyone. I've mentioned this on the show before, where when I went through my amputation, I was just in this sort of let's just keep moving forward
Yeah.
kind of headspace, where I thought I just got to get through this. And I think to a large degree, and I don't know what it was like for you, especially having children. Oof. Um, I felt like I was doing it for everyone else because I saw the pain around me, right? Because your family, your friends, and everyone kind of receives serious illness in a different way. Some people have sort of an understanding of it where it's like, okay, my mom this, or my aunt that, or whatever. And others, amputation, like, oh no, it's this terrible thing. So
Right.
I was just moving forward, moving forward. And
Yeah.
I've commented often now, you know, moving into my seventh year, I go through fits of depression now,
Sure.
years later,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
where I look down.
It's
Yeah, I look down and I'm just,
and it hits you.
oh yeah,
It just hits you.
it just,
You're like, it's not there.
oh
It's not
yeah,
there
it
anymore.
just, it just
Yeah.
kicks my teeth out. Like, wow,
Yeah.
wow, that's
No.
that's really bad. And
Yeah.
it's, I feel like my emotional set is sort of recalibrating and allowing me to feel some of those things now as if, well, now I'm safe. People see me around me as safe and well and doing well and thriving, all those positive things that people who love us want to see, gives them comfort. And now I have that permission from like my subconscious to go, just cry, man, let it out.
To mourn. To mourn.
Yeah, just mourn, just
Yeah.
grieve it,
Yeah. And
feel it.
it's again, I am no psychologist. I had the privilege of working with some of the best darn trauma psychologists in the country at the trauma center, and I learned a lot. But going through it myself, it was like you said, for me it was during the chemo. Got to get through it, got to get through it. I have 4 kids, I've got a husband, I've got a life, I got to get back, da 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 da. And then when all of that was said and done, I was expecting to feel this huge weight lifted off my shoulders, and it didn't.
Mm,
All was said and done, and I go, why am I still feeling this way? And I was realizing, I was like, okay, it took me a while to kind of pick up on it, but I'm like, I am having the post-traumatic stress that I see my patients have. Why? Because cancer is not normal. Amputation is not normal,
hmm.
right? These are not normal things that are meant to happen to the human body.
Right.
And we are normal people trying to deal with an abnormal situation.
Yeah.
Right. So, and just trying to acknowledge that and get the help for that. And then realizing that, yes, cancer, my oncologist calls it canceritis, where, a little hangnail, right, will send you over the roof.
Sure.
Right. and you have your triggers, you have your things, your days. For me, it was my children's birthdays that were definitely very difficult those first few years.
Mm.
And you learn that, in my case, again, I have less of those days than I used to have. But when I do have one of those days, it's saying, you know what, for whatever reason, I need to just have a day. Let myself have that day.
Yep.
Whether it's a pity party, whether it's everything is wrong, but then I go to bed that night, say my prayers, and the next day I start again
Yeah. No,
and
and
keep
that's so
moving forward.
wise. And
Um,
I feel like it's great advice, because if you don't allow yourself that, if you stifle, push that down, um, it's going to build, and
yeah.
it's going to affect you on a more of a grand scale, where, hey, we can sacrifice a day to the emotional gods. We can say, okay, well, this is just, that's what's happening today. And
Yep.
it is what it is. And tomorrow's a new day. And I think that's
Yes.
the best way to approach it. The thing I want to talk to you about in your work with amputees, as a physical therapist, I want to talk about fitness level. I want to talk about people finding that, reaching milestones with their fitness, coming back, we call it the comeback, and the challenges that people face, because so often I get to speak to amputees. I'm very fortunate, like yourself, to have, this platform to be able to get
Mhm.
things out. And then you're more of an expert than me. So people kind of come at me like they're talking to you.
No,
Like I'm
no, 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 no.
like, I know what and what should I'm like, you're going to have to call Cosi, because I can't give you that advice, but
Please hold.
please hold. I'm messaging you, Cosi. Can you talk to this person this morning?
No, happy to.
I know
Yeah.
you would. I know you would. But I very often find that some amputees, let's face it, have a long road ahead of them. And I want to talk about that group specifically,
Mhm.
because it's a very, very complex set of feelings, especially when someone's mobility was very challenged
Yeah.
previous to their amputation. And now they are tasked with donning a prosthesis, trying to get mobile again, all of these things that are very hard to digest. And I feel very deeply for these people. I feel a tremendous amount of empathy towards these people, because let's face it, we're in this world of toxic positivity now, and these folks are looking, at the cool blades and the Paralympics and, all the, slick, sexy, amputees. And they're saying, seriously, like, this is not what I'm going through. This is not my life. This is not me. And I bring that up only to find out, when you sort of embark on that journey with a patient that, let's say, is dealing with some serious odds against them,
Mhm. Yep.
what's your approach?
First of all, I love having someone who has, not that I love that they have these challenges, but for me as a clinician, I say, let's do this, because I've been a PT for 23 years. I've been working in healthcare for 30 years. And I've seen some stories of people who have no business walking, and I've seen them run. And then I've seen people who should have been doing cartwheels after their second session, and they never make it out of their chair.
Mm.
So I don't really look at those statistics anymore. And I actually embrace those challenges as a clinician, saying, okay, we've got a long road ahead. And if you listen to my show, you know that I have no filter. I don't sugarcoat things. And I will be very blunt with people, saying, you've got a lot of stuff that we need to work through. And it has to come from them. It really does. And that's another mind shift as a clinician over the years, where in the beginning I thought I would be enough to get any patient out of a situation. And I've learned that unfortunately that's not the case. My enthusiasm, my passion for wanting to help a person is not going to be enough if that person is not truly motivated.
Yeah.
And a lot of this was reinforced in, a couple of trips I took to Guatemala, in the past couple of summer with my children working at the amputee clinic there, where seeing people who are in the worst of poverty situations in a country where there are no resources, right? And they really have every single odd stacked up against them. And I see them whizzing around on crutches in some of the worst situations.
Yeah.
So when I have a situation like that, I assess the patient's mentality. Where are they at right now? Are they in a place where they're ready to work and they're ready to accept the cross that is being given to them in terms of what they have to get through to get successful? If they're not there yet, then I gently let them know, like, this is going to be a lot of work and you are going to need this support, and try to connect them to those resources, because it does take a village. It does take a village. And especially connecting them with amputee peer support. I love the Coalition's Certified Peer Visitor Program, connecting them to support groups. That's a huge thing that I try to do for a lot of my patients, because many of them have never even met another amputee other than themselves, right? So when it comes to these challenging cases, I think providing them with that support system and being very upfront and saying, this is the reality of what your journey is going to be. And part of that also includes there's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back in the progress. I find that patients who are consistent are successful.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of patients, so my practice right now, it is not insurance based. It is a cash pay private practice. And there are some challenges for patients being able to get to my clinic, but the patients that are truly vested in their success, that are coming and showing up, even if it's only once a week that they can afford to come, those are the ones that have the success.
Yeah.
All the other obstacles, the clinical obstacles, we can find a solution. We can find solutions between technology, clinicians, fancy equipment, whatever needs to happen. That part we can find solutions for that. But it really, really starts with the mentality of the patient.
Yeah, I've always felt like showing up is, for me anyway, is a big part of it. You got to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I so love when you said consistency. Consistency it can sometimes be the X factor. It's what creates forward movement, even when there is a setback. Shortly after I got fitted for a prep, I developed I have a bony prominence right below my knee on my residual limb. And I was in a prep that, maybe wasn't the best fit. And, I was doing my, headstrong, stupid guy thing of, I'm just going to walk through the pain. I'm just going to walk through the pain. And I ended up with a really serious, pressure wound. And I ended up, taking several steps back and ended up in wound care and got very close to a revision that would have taken me from below the knee to above the knee. So
that's no good.
Yeah. So that was one of those lessons in consistency, certainly, but also patience. And like you said, there's going to be a lot of challenges with this. And and I know you've promoted adjustable sockets, which were a godsend for me.
Good.
Yeah. So initially, like a lot of new amputees, I had, massive fluid shift throughout the day.
Yep.
I mean, it was way beyond ply socks. It was just like, how many of these socks can you wear? I'm like online asking questions like, how many of these can you put on? 30? People are like, no, exclamation point.
But I've seen that, and it's scary.
Yeah, exactly. So when I ended up, with an adjustable, that was a game changer First of all,
Yeah.
they did a cutout on my bony prominence. Hey, let's take the pressure off of that one area, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then I had an adjustable. So throughout the day, not only could I manage my fluid loss and losses and gains, but I could also acclimate to a prosthesis well, because when I was moving, I was fine, Cosi. I was fine. I could walk around. I felt pretty confident still. It wasn't 100% where I could pivot and turn and do all the normal movements that I was used to. But for the most part, I wasn't like gimping around or anything. And when I sat still, all bets were off. I was in so much pain. I just it was almost unbearable. I would just sit in my chair at work, and within 5 minutes, yeah,
Yeah.
like my leg
Yeah.
was
That
just,
rebound.
yeah, it was
Mhm.
no, 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 no. And I can't even tell you how fortunate I felt that I could just, loosen it up, just let all those tissues relax. While I was sitting, I was pain free. And then when I was ready to get up and get mobile again, I tightened myself back up and go about my business. So that was wonderful. That was probably, maybe 2 to 3 years of acclimation, getting
Yeah.
active, doing all those things. And, now I'm in a rigid socket, and
Mhm.
I'm comfortable
You're
20,
good to go.
I'm comfortable 24/7.
Good.
I don't even know what it would be like to go back to an adjustable. I don't need it. And
Right.
I very, very rarely, if not at all, ever even have to add a sock. So my
You're one of
limb,
the unicorns. You're
well,
one of the
yeah,
unicorns that I talk
my
about on my show.
yeah, my limb doesn't really do a whole lot anymore as far as fluid exchange. It is what it is. And I think my prosthetist said it's matured. It's kind of
Yes.
like you're good to go. Like you're not going to
It's mature
be,
and it's stable.
yeah,
Yes.
it's stable.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is wonderful, that I can sit
Yes.
for long periods of time, never bothers me. You can make it through an entire movie without taking your leg off, all of that stuff, which is great. And I really appreciate that, Cosi, because when I do watch Cosi Talks, it's just chock full of all those little tips and tricks, and real time sort of, experts kind of weighing in and, giving us amputees really, really valuable information. Um, the thing that I was wondering when I was, watching, I went on a binge the other night and probably watched like, I don't know, like 15 different episodes. And yeah, it was like my Game of Thrones, Cosi
I was
Talks.
like, wow, you must have had a lot of monsters that day because I talk way too much. That's a lot of hours.
No, I really enjoyed it and learned a bunch. The thing that kept pinging in my head was, how do you procure guests? I mean, walk me through that process.
Meaning how do I I'm sorry, you cut out on that one part.
How do you procure guests? Like, what is your process? How do you get people to come
Uh
on? What's your qualifiers? Like, what are you thinking of when you reach out to someone and say, "Yeah, I need to get them on because."
Well, in the beginning, because when I first started the show, I really had no intention of doing what I do now. It was just I would go live on the amputee peer and support group and on the amputee help and support line. Those were the only two groups that would allow me to go live. So I'm still eternally grateful to those admins of those pages. But it was basically just like, I'm going to go and give the information that I keep hearing in these Facebook groups that people are just constantly asking these questions that I can just answer for them.
Yeah.
And so I did that for well over a year, twice a week, every Wednesday and Thursday evening. And then finally, College Park had been apparently listening in on my talks. And they were the ones who first approached me and said, we would like to sponsor you. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means. And I'm not interested in selling anything. And they're like, no, 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 no. We just want to support you're educating the community. And so when I started working with College Park and then shortly afterwards Freedom Innovations and Limb Innovations, I was learning myself. So I really got to have the behind the scenes look on prosthetic feet, which is what College Park really is an expert on. And I would say, I have so many questions related to how do I choose a prosthetic foot? What am I getting myself into? What do I need to tell my prosthetist? So, okay, let's create an educational show on this. And who in College Park is the expert that I can bring on the show to really answer these questions? And that's usually how it would come about. I've been a student of the human gait cycle for 30 years, and I'm still a student. I'm still learning. So it was part and parcel just my own education as a clinician and wanting to getting an inside look as to what all this new technology, new surgical procedures, targeted muscle reinnervation. I had the guy who pioneered that surgery on my show, and now with osseointegration. And then my viewers asking me all these questions. So going back to the adjustable socket, everybody in the world was asking me about adjustable socket technology, and I really had no concept of it. So I was just like, okay, let me go see what's out there. Who is making adjustable socket technology? What does it mean? And from my viewers, what are they using and what are they liking? So I would kind of weigh that against what I was reading in the literature and say, you know what? This company right here, Click Medical, I'm really hearing a lot of great stuff about them. Let me learn more about them. And if I think I'm liking what I'm seeing, then let's just see if they would like to have a collaboration together.
It's great.
And that's how a lot of this came about. A lot of it was also dumb luck. Again, people who have helped me so much throughout the years introducing me. They're saying, hey, Cosi, you really should go talk to this person here from this company or that person there. And for me, I approach them and I go, okay, what can I learn from you? What is it that I can learn from you that I can then bring onto the show? Because for me, that's the mission of the show is education, information, and empowerment. And it's not just for the amputees, it's also for clinicians. I've had a lot more clinicians listening in on the show because there's so much of this that is not being presented to the PT community. And that's another soapbox there. So that's kind of how and there have been some companies that they've approached me um, that I can tell that they just kind of want me to sell their product on the
Yeah.
show.
We've had some of that
And I
too.
have to Yeah, and I just have to politely decline, or that they have a problem with me talking about competing companies, right? And I also have to politely decline because I'm just like, guys, I'm trying to present as objective an opinion as possible, and I want folks to know all of their options. So over the years, I've kind of narrowed things down in terms of who I partner with and who I have on the show. But I've had some phenomenal guests on the show.
Yeah, it's great. The content I highly recommend. It's Cosi Talks. It's not hard to find on YouTube, and some of the guests are just brilliant people.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
what they bring to the conversation is so incredibly helpful just to
Yeah.
understand, on an engineering level, on a clinical level, what goes into a lot of that technology. The thing I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you too, I mean, if you were to say in a snapshot, like what's exciting you right now, about the future of prosthetics?
I am really, and this is a completely 180 turn from just even 4 years ago. I am really looking forward to seeing where osseointegration takes us. When I saw my first osseointegration patient in the United States, he was a bilateral AK. He had had his procedure done outside the United States, and it was a disaster. It was a
Hmm.
disaster. It was a very poor outcome. The patient had not received follow up care. Um, the stomacytes looked awful. And I just thought, who in the world would think of doing this procedure and why in the world? And well, what I didn't know at that time was that there were different methods of OI out there, and they were not created equal. So, but that kind of spurred me to saying, okay, I need to figure out what this surgery is because I know people are going to start asking me if they should have it done or not. And, 4 years later, it led me to a partnership with Integrum, And just seeing the work that they are doing is incredible globally. And Dr. Brandemark, his father literally invented osseointegration back in the 1960s. So the modern dental implant that we have today comes from his discoveries in the 1960s.
Wow.
So it was really cool to be able to have the origin story, and to really see the progression of how this has evolved to work for amputees. So I don't think it is meant for everybody. I'll just put that out there. I don't think osseointegration is everybody's a candidate for osseointegration. I think there's a very particular criteria and candidacy for that. But for those who do meet that criteria, they've had some amazing outcomes. And to see where that technology is going to be in 10, 15, 20 years, I think is going to be incredible. So that's one thing right there. Um, Gosh, I think also the advances with targeted muscle reinnervation, and it kind of also correlates with OI. We're going to start to see a lot of overlap there with targeted muscle reinnervation
Yeah,
and
educate
how
me
it's
on
going
that.
to.
Yeah, because I'm unfamiliar
So
with that
targeted,
piece.
yes, so targeted muscle reinnervation, sometimes called TMR, is basically a treatment for neuromas. So, the quick background to that: when a surgeon does an amputation, they will typically take, after they cut through all the tissues, they'll take the nerve, pull it slightly, cut it, and then tuck it back into the tissue. And I like to say, idle hands make devil's work. So, that little nerve ending has nothing to do but cause trouble. So, it'll form scar tissue, which is called a neuroma. If it's a motor nerve, meaning a nerve that used to control muscles, not a problem. If it's a sensory nerve, that's where you start having some severe pain and can trigger a lot of really bad phantom pain. So, targeted muscle reinnervation was pioneered by Dr. Dumanian about 30 years ago. And what they discovered was, if they take that nerve ending and essentially plug it back into a muscle, you're allowing that nerve to do its job, and it makes it happy. And they've had some fantastic outcomes with phantom pain.
Wow.
And now they're using targeted muscle reinnervation also in the upper extremity for myoelectric, so for mind control prosthetic devices, and kind of rewiring the nerves to function that way.
It's
So
incredible.
it's kind of like the Luke Skywalker. It's a Luke Skywalker, hand scenario, and I think it's
Yeah.
very cool.
And it's funny because I, I- I'm a kind of a ferocious reader, and I've always been curious about, how science fiction genre, whether it's, literature or film, where do they get these ideas from? Like,
Right?
like who
Yeah.
thought of that Luke was going to have this, robotic hand that, looked and acted and did all these things. And
Oh yeah.
I did a deeper dive on it, and I got into all of this different literature on what's referred to as futurists. And futurists are these people from the scientific and medical communities that essentially theorize on what we're capable of as a species in
Hmm.
terms of
Hmm.
technology, in terms of what they believe is coming, not just in theory, but in practical application. And so I get excited because so much of what you're talking about right now, reminds me of, like
Hmm.
old sci-fi. And
Yeah.
I think, I guess I'm bummed because cars aren't flying yet. Although we'd have the technology, we can't,
We've got the.
we can't get them up
No,
in
and if
the
you want
air.
to take it, if I'll really wave my nerd flag high, I just thought of this. I love Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I'm
Really?
a total Trekkie.
Yeah.
And there's this one of the movies that it was of the next generation, and it was Data, the robot, and he was being grafted with human skin. And you see the robotics underneath and the human skin on top, and how he was able to now feel the skin.
Yeah.
And I remember that movie came out, it was with the cyborg queen or something crazy like that. So that came out like probably 15 years ago or more.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see whispers of that now.
Right.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And anything that, even in theory, that could suggest that some of that phantom pain,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate. It's not some, the phantom pain, you know, uh, demons visit me, however, not that often.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate in that regard. But I know that there are plenty of patients, plenty of our community that are really struggling with that on a daily basis. And my heart goes out to them. So, those advancements very much excite me, because if there is something that can be done just to get that whole situation under control, would be fantastic. Again, pushing us forward into a more comfortable space to wear a prosthesis, to get active, to get more mobile, because let's face it, very often, phantom pain is just another roadblock in that process. And if we can remove that, we'd see a lot better outcomes, across the spectrum. And some of those folks.
Yeah, no. And we probably should do another show together just on phantom pain, but there's still, even just now, so many of the conservative methods. And actually last Wednesday, today's Friday, so 2 days ago on my show, I got into it a lot because people were asking me questions about the phantom pain. There are so many conservative methods that are available that are very effective. That again, it's finding the clinician who understands that and is able to educate the person on consistency with those conservative treatments and how to present them with the different options and how to just fine tune. So if they do have to resort to a medication, how they can, use the smallest dosage of medication in conjunction with those conservative methods. But we can do a whole show on that alone right there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, I feel like we just scratched the surface today. And of course, I want to thank you for being here. With you, an hour goes by like a blink of an eye. And, I so appreciate what you bring to the community. Cosi Belloso, am I saying that right?
Yes, you are. Yes,
Belloso?
you are.
Okay. Yes. Cosi, you can catch her on YouTube. Cosi Talks is streaming on social media, and I would highly recommend that you check it out. Again, Cosi, thank you for being here. My name is Rick Bontkowski. This is the AMP'D UP211 Podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness. We'll see you next time.